Hello and welcome to the DoneJS Contributors Meeting. Today is Friday, April 27th, 2018. My name is Chasen Lahara, coming to you from Long Beach, California. We've got multiple time zones today. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Hey, I'm Justin from Chicago in the CMT. I don't remember what time zone.
CST.
CST, like ±7 or something. I don't remember. 6.
All right. I am Matthew. I'm in the EST, Eastern Time Zone.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Sheriff from Algeria, North Africa.
Are you in UTC, Sheriff? Or is it UTC +1?
Yes, ATC +1 here. Yes.
Nice. Well, thanks guys for coming. Today we're going to go over the results of our last community survey. Then we'll go through some demos of what we've been working on the last couple of weeks. And then I think we'll have some bike shedding to do after demos. So let me get started by sharing my screen and talk about survey results. So this is how things, I did show my screen, okay. So this is how things came out. Documentation seems to be the thing that wins out most for our survey. So at the top, improving our docs and adding a data guide. Then the post-act proposal, or easy state management for React with Can Observe. And then the rest after that. I thought it was interesting to see that IE11 was at the very bottom, kind of confirms what our original decision to not focus on that yet. So for us at Bitovi and what our priorities are going to be, we want to, with the can query logic stuff that Justin has been working on and the tree shaking stuff that Matthew has been working on, I think we're going to move towards releasing CanJS 5 with those 2 features, and as part or after that, then we'll do a cleanup of our docs and tackle this one. And then for one of the things that we got feedback on from the survey was people saying, you know, a little bit more needs to be done for improving the popularity of our stuff. And I think one way that we can help with that is being more involved with the React ecosystem. So we plan on tackling this as well as a way to get our stuff more out there. We are not going to tackle the data guide right now. We would like to do that, but with the can query logic stuff that we're going to be shipping soon, and some improvements that we want to make to Can Connect, don't feel like this would be a good time for us to focus on that. I think that's all I have to say. Do you guys have any comments on this?
Nope.
No. All right.
Good.
Good talk.
Thanks
yeah.
everybody for submitting their submitting the form, the questionnaire.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been following up with people. If you haven't heard a response from me yet and you wrote something in the survey, you will today. But I think I followed up with almost everyone. Cool. Let's do demos. Matthew, do you want to get us started?
I absolutely do. Okay, so I've been working on tree shaking the last few weeks. I did want to show off what that looks like, but I'm not going to do it because I think I'm doing it wrong with Webpack, and I don't want to give unfair file comparisons. But on the still side, it works out pretty well, especially with the optimized build. The optimized build is really awesome. So anyways, yeah, so yeah, instead what I'm going to talk about is how we're going to get this to work on the CanJS side. So in CanJS 4.2, we added this CanES module, and if you go to canjs.com, API guides, experimental ES module usage, it explains how to use this ES module. Oh, what's all this stuff? Did I not click on the right thing? I didn't click on the right thing. It explains how to use this CanES module. Anyways, it's just a module that exports all the stuff from Can core. In CanJS 5.0, this is going to become the main module. This is going to become it's it's going to be the main. So when you import can, you'll get this, and then you'll be able to do stuff like this. I want can component, I want define map, et cetera, et cetera. Now, with tree shaking, what occurs is it basically, it says, well, you're not using can route, so we're going to remove that, and it's not going to be in your production build. So that's the cool thing about tree shaking, is it enables us to have this one can package where you can just import everything you need, which is going to change the way we document can. We're going to document by like the names of things instead of the package names. Anyways, it's a really cool thing. So the problem that we are facing is, how do we make this work in 5.0? Like, how is this going to look? Because in 4.2, if you'll notice, it's just core, and then I have ecosystem question mark, and we didn't add that. And the problem is that there's a lot of stuff in ecosystem. There's like React view models, which imports all of React, and there's can connect feathers, which imports feathers, and there's different stuff that for a typical CanJS application you don't use. So the problem with just putting all of ecosystem into the main can package is that you would wind up loading a bunch of stuff that you don't use. It's gonna, especially if you're using, well, not especially if you're using Steel, but if you're using Steel, this is gonna slow down the load times, and that's not good. We don't want that. So we're trying to find a solution for how we could make this work the best that we can. So the couple of ideas that I came up with when I started looking at this is, one is to have separate, like a can all, which it contains everything, and then have like a can ecosystem, which contains ecosystem, and just leave can to core. There's some problems with this. Well, I mean, the main problem is it's pretty inconvenient, is that you have to import stuff, you have to do can/ecosystem, and it kind of ruins the idea that we're going to name everything after the export name in the documentation, because you can't really do that because can zone would not be part of can. So that's unfortunate. Option B was to bundle all of can together. The idea here is that if we have one bundle which contains all of can, yeah, it's going to have some stuff that you're not going to use, but in development mode, it's only going to have to load one file, so it's not going to be bad at all. And then when you do the build, it's going to tree shake off the stuff you don't use from that one module. This breaks down though when you start using individual packages. Like if you used, for some reason, you needed to use your own version of can query logic, then there would be two versions of can query logic, and for a lot of the stateful stuff that just won't work. So this became an untenable option. We just can't do this. So we needed to do some variation of having everything loaded the traditional way in Steel, and then we came up with the solution. We came up with, I think, Justin, you get credit for this. Unfortunately, I hate giving you credit, but you came up with the idea of, let's tree shake it in the client, so that we can actually add export default as zone from can zone. And so this is what I'm currently working on now. This is a feature of Steel, is that Steel will be able to load this module. Actually, part's going to change, I think, but it's going to load this module, and it's going to see that everything is just exporting stuff from other packages. This is a completely what do you call it? It's a side effect free module. It doesn't do anything of its own. So we can take this module, and Steel is going to be able to detect that it is a tree shakeable module, and then it's going to be able to look at all the parent modules and figure out what the parent modules actually use. And it could say, hey, we don't use can route or can set, so we're just going to delete those from the file, recompile it, and that becomes like the definition of this particular module. So this is what I'm working on now. It gets a little bit tricky when you start importing dynamically, which people do in Steel applications, is that you Steel import, or like a DoneJS app, use the can import tag to dynamically import stuff, because what's going to happen is we're going to have this module loaded, and it's going to turn out that some other module comes along and it does use can route, and now we need to add can route back. So we're going to have to recompile it when that occurs. So I'm kind of working out the details of that now and trying to get this implemented. But the point is that we are going to be able to have a single CAN main, importing CAN, and get the benefits of having everything in one module, exported from one module, but still not load stuff that you don't use, which is really cool. So this is, I think, a really nice thing that we're going to have, a nice little feather in CAN and DoneJS's cap. All right, I'm done.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing, Matthew.
All right.
Nice work, Matthew. I'm excited for this.
Yeah, I am too. All right, Justin, would you like to maybe show off some stuff that Kevin's been working on too? You are, did I just mute you on?
Yes,
there you go.
I would like to. I've suddenly stopped seeing everybody. I don't know how to, oh, there you are. Okay, yes, I'm gonna steal a little bit of Kevin's, which is the dev tools. Give me 1 second while I get it ready. Okay, so let me show the screen. I don't have as good of a demo as Kevin. Kevin's not feeling good today, so he will probably do a much better demo of this a little bit later, more how to use it. But if you go, CanJS now has a Chrome extension that you can search for, and you can give it a high rating if you want us to keep on working on this. I'm going to just show a little bit of it. There's going to be more that Kevin shows later. So if I'm on canjs.com, this is an actual CanJS widget. I can inspect it. And then if I select that and it has a view model, I'll see this CanJS view model tab here in the element. And then I can see the view model and change its data. So I can see if I change it here. Oops. Go back to that. Elements. Okay, we can see it's 2. I can play around with it, change it here. And so you can see what's in your view model and you can change the data. I think people have been working on making it so it works with nested data. I didn't get time to set up a demo to show if that's working right now, but that's what Kevin has been working on. The other cool thing I like about it is I have this, this is the video player that I did, I think yesterday or Wednesday. I showed how to create this video player. Let's say, we see this code that's listening to playing or whatever that's calling play on the video element, and we want to know why that happens. So we can set a breakpoint here, and if I hit play, we'll obviously hit that breakpoint. Now, if you look in the call stack, it can be a little confusing. You can actually eventually see it in this call stack, but in other call stacks, it can be rather confusing to know exactly what changed what. So in here, you can actually see, oh, update video playing happened because on click called toggle play. And that is what has effectively changed the, you can actually go into where like toggle play was actually called by CanJS, which isn't as helpful as like the names right now. We're looking to see if we can, actually make it so you click this and you actually go to the toggle play method itself. But that's really useful to have this condensed, consolidated, vision into exactly why something happened. And
That is really cool.
Yeah, I will say even the call stack in CanJS 4.0 is vastly improved. Like it is still going to be long, and you're going to see all of this flushing of the event queue system. But you can still see here, like, oh, toggle play was called. Then we're in like the evaluation of the toggle play method, which calls the video player VM, which sets the playing property on it, and eventually you work your way up to here. Our goal is to make this just reduce all of that. I will remind people that you can get the same information by doing CanQ's log stack. And it gives you a lot of the same information. So this button was clicked on with this event, which is essentially ran the onClick event handler, which eventually called update video playing. And I think there's more information here too, so you can like get the reason. That's because the plain state changed to true from false. So very useful dev tools in 4.0 now. So, and it plays. Okay, enough of that. All right, so that's the one thing I wanted to talk about. The other thing I wanted to just quickly highlight, at least, I've gone over this already a decent amount, the canned query logic. So if you've watched previous videos, you might have seen this, but I think it's worth going through another summary for people. Now that I've written the documentation, it's a little bit easier and this is much more finalized. The goal is essentially that you don't have to use can set directly anymore. You instead define your types on your define map, and eventually we'll hopefully have something similar for can observe. You define your types in your define map, and you say, what is the identity properties? And it will build the, actually internal to can connect and things like that, it will build, given the schema of this to do, it will build the query logic for it automatically. So you don't actually have to see it anymore, which is nice. But you can always build it yourself. So if you built this to do, this is essentially the same thing as creating a query logic, which is kind of the replacement for can set. And you pass that as query logic to one of your connections. And that's what it uses to know what the parameters of your data mean. Can query logic solves some of the problems of can set, specifically how easy it is to configure, right? So one, maybe you don't have to do any configuration. That's an improvement. Two, if you have to make it adapt to different formats, it's, I think, much conceptually easier now. So by default, I think I talk about it somewhere in here. The default query structure now looks like this. This is what can query logic expects your services to look like. And this is a mashup of essentially Mongo syntax inside the filter option, and everything else is JSON API. So there's this JSON API specification. That's this. We're following at least the parameter part of that. And then inside here, you have access to all of the Mongo comparison operators, which are now supported. So this is what it expects, but let's say for some reason your server expects this property to be where instead of filter. Well, you can create your own query logic that essentially has this object that is used to translate to and from the standard query structure to whatever your query structure is. So if these are the params that your server is expecting, here you can see I'm changing the where into filter and then returning the value. And then if I'm going from a query to what your server expects, I am, you can see I'm taking the filter, naming it where, and putting where on. Now you see I'm mutating these, that's fine, because this is past a clone anyway, so you can, you don't have to worry about mutating these objects. So it's easier to configure that way. The other way it's easier to configure is it's actually, while I would still say not super simple, it is actually, I think, much more reasonable to create your own custom like integrations, own query logic than it was at all possible in can set. What this looks like, well, so first we have some built-in special types like we had before. If you want to make an enumerable, you can just call query logic make enum, and this makes a enumerable type that you can just use on your define maps. And now you have they're special because enumerables, we know the full set of values in the set. We can do special optimizations because we know something is enumerated. You can create that enum like this. That's easy. I actually put a different way that I discovered that was possible to do it, which I guess I will show because it's worth talking about. This is an alternative way you can create a status type. This is using what's becoming part of Can Reflect is this get schema that defines your type. This is essentially saying status. If I want to create a new status, it goes through this function and can do whatever it wants. This is to create a new status. Basically, this is so you can do type coercion, things like that. You can see here I'm lowercasing whatever someone passed. I can also do things like check if it was not one of these and throw a warning or an error or do whatever you want. And this actually can be plugged into define map. So define map will run this through its type coercion. But then I can say, hey, this is an OR type and its values are new, assigned, or complete. And this is essentially the same thing that make enum is just creating for you. So this is like if you wanted to, have more control, especially around how values that are set, if you want to make sure that they are kind of like type coerced to one of these values, you can do it that way. I know I'm going way over my time, but that's okay.
You're doing the demos for 2 people, so I think you're good.
So not only can you change the structure, you can actually create types wholesale that do a whole lot of things. There's an example. I'm not going to go into it real quick. There's an example showing how you can deal with like if people want to put types like this, like their date, but you want to say, hey, I want to get greater than this. Well, you need to convert that to something that has like a comparable value, either a string or a number. So you can essentially represent these values as what's called a date string set by basically having something that produces a value of that knows how, it'll take this, but then its value is implemented to return a number that is comparable. And then if you essentially, it shows how to configure this as part of your schema. You can create like a date string type that has its set type as that set we saw, and it shows how to configure it. I'm not going to really go into that. I'm just going to mention that there's like shorthands for doing basic conversion stuff. And then if you really wanted to get extreme, there's a way to define your own set types where you implement their union, intersection, and difference. And then you can essentially say that this property on the query should be using this to define how to do union, intersection, etc. on that individual property. Yeah, I show like how you can do test what the query logic that you've produced. There's a whole discussion on how it works. I don't know. This is coming. I don't know. I feel now to show my face and the humanity in my eyes when I talk about this. I spent a lot of time on this, like an incredible amount of time, and I want it to be successful because it solves a few problems I think really well. But my concern, and I'll being upfront and honest about it, is that it's like it was kind of, it was the #1 voted thing that people asked for, and maybe it's it was because it was so confusing and hard to use. I still feel like in terms of like getting people to use our technology in general, it's not going to be a huge driver because I don't know how many people are building real-time apps, and I doubt that many people are actually doing caching of local storage of like the general population Bitovi. There's a lot of people who vote for these things at Bitovi, and they might do a lot of that, so that's why it was voted so highly. I'm just hoping that this does make people happy, and I'm cautiously pessimistic that it will.
For me, I think there's 2 things where it really like satisfies the original goal of like making CanSet easier, which is the more simple configuration for getting set up like right out of the gate, and then the configuration that's required for some of the more common use cases where people would need to write their own can set logic. Those APIs are more simple. So yeah. I feel like in that way, this really does address what was voted on.
I think it addresses people's problems with it. I think that's true. But let me put it this way: given the amount of effort that I just dumped into this, like it. I mean, especially like the technology itself is actually pretty interesting to have like set theory put into JavaScript. How that my concern is in some ways like because I've put so much time on it, I want it to be useful and like exist outside of like CanJS, and I just don't know like the people and things like that to bring it to. Because it could just do some interesting things well. I don't know.
This is a good time to plug that if anyone watching this is involved in the MongoDB community or another community that would have where the ideas would overlap.
Yeah, the idea is it's really going to be like if you were building backends that support real-time or caching, then it would be very useful because what it allows us to do is like, let's say you had built a real-time app, and in real-time apps, a big problem is knowing which data you should send out. So like a bunch of people are kind of working on a shared data set. They might not be looking at all of it, but what you end up doing is being like, okay, here, this record was created, and you just send that. You broadcast that to like everybody who might have access, whether they're looking at it or not, and that is really expensive. One thing that it can do is solve that problem because you could essentially on the session keep the sets of data that everybody has accessed and be able to kind of just like send messages like as people change pages, when they've requested data. You would probably have to send another message like saying like, okay, they're no longer looking at this page, but worth it in terms of like reducing overhead in terms of, real-time communication. You could look in the session, say, oh, what data have they accessed? If the newly created data belongs in a set that they are interested in or currently viewing, then send it to them. But don't just broadcast it everywhere. You can also do things like caching where you could have layered caching of like, hey, I want all to-dos are in the database, but all completed to-dos are in another like cache closer to the user. And then all to completed to-dos that are urgent. And what it can do is things like, well, if someone requests all to-dos, it can like take the data from that little subset of data completed to do, start streaming that to the person and fall through to the other caches, but only get the things that are like, if it was all active and completed, which doesn't make sense, all to do today and completed, it could like go get all of the completed ones that are not due today, and then it could get all of the ones due forever. It could do like smaller requests throughout that kind of caching pipeline. We don't work on anything like that, but that stuff seems cool. I just have to figure out how to like make it so Node folks would find it and possibly use it. Anyways, so that's it for me.
Awesome, thank you. Let me share my screen. My demo is not going to be nearly as interesting, but so I've been working on. Let me present to everyone. So I've been working on one of the proposals that was voted on most highly last survey, which was the improved routing and testing to components. So I've been working on some of the like underlying work that's required for that. So I have a couple of APIs that I want to show off real quick. So first is can components. It's going to have a new signature. So you'll be able to create a component constructor and then call new on it to get a new instance of that component. So in this example, we've got the my greeting custom element, and it has, you know, all of the normal things you would expect. And we can call new on the constructor, and then the what it returns is an object that has an element property, which is the document fragment, and the view model, which is an instance of the view model. So this makes it really easy to create instances of components without having to render them with Stash or attach or at all attach them to the DOM, which I think is really cool. Will definitely improve both routing and testing. And this signature is going to accept some options. So far, I've only completed one, which is providing templates. And I just noticed that these docs are wrong. It should be templates.
You also probably should be careful showing people default as an object like that.
You're right. This should be a function that returns this array.
And since you're ES6, so you can just do like the very shorthand parenthesis arrow, and then that's all you need. Yeah,
thanks for pointing that out. I'll get that fixed. So you'll be able to pass an options object to your component constructor. So right now I'm just showing being able to pass in a template. I'll also be working on passing in content for the component, and then any view model, how the view model that you want the component instantiated with. So that's what this example is.
Do you think we should just like clone what's ever there and then have like a default value for when you really do want it shared? I'm just like, people complain about this and talked about it forever. Like we could just can reflect serialize for every time an instance is created, whatever's there, and then make that confusion go away. Until the people who are confused why it's not the same instance and why it's being cloned complain, but it's something we could do anyways.
Yeah, that's worth thinking about.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's first up. And then the second is, so I just mentioned you're going to be able to pass in a view model, which is great for initial values, but kind of the problem that we're trying to solve with routing is being able to you know, have like create new component instances and then have their view model props bound to your app state or your route state or what have you. So this is where something like can value is going to come in. So this is a new package that's going to make it easy to basically bind or get an observable for a particular key on another observable object. So it introduces a few methods. Let me look at a simple example. It's easier to talk in the concrete. So like here, we have this map observable that has an inner prop. That's another map that has some properties. So with can value, I can get an observable back that is bound to the outer's inner dot key property, bound to that path. So with this observable, I can like get the value from it, which will get this hello value, or I can set the value of this observable and it'll update this map. So this is the two-way binding, and then we've got one way in both directions. So from gives you an observable that will just get the value from another observable, but you wouldn't be able to set it. And then two is the opposite of that, where you can just set the property of another map. You wouldn't be able to get the value out of it.
Which can value would be core. Sorry to go on a quick tangent, but I noticed it's under infrastructure. I actually think it would be under core.
I agree. I miscategorized it. I'll move it under core because it'll be the main API that people use in creating like new component instances and then binding stuff.
Well, outside, it won't be the main one. The main one will be they'll do it in their templates, but yeah, out for testing, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. I think that's all I have to show off for these two. Any questions, comments?
Well, do we want to talk about the, like, because we wanted to get rid of having to call setVal can reflect. So we wanted like to have consistent API, like a user-facing API for for what can value returns.
Yeah, we can talk about that real quick. So this API is not great, right? Having to use can reflect. What Justin just said is using can reflect to like get and set values on the observables that can value returns. Not great. So I opened up an issue with a couple of ideas. We could either have get and set methods that are used for the same thing, or we could just have a value property that's a getter setter. So bind would have this key observable would have a value property, and you could just do key observable.value equals hello, or key observable.value would get the value back. Any thoughts?
Go ahead.
I was going to say I'm personally leaning towards this just because it's a more simple. It's just a more simple API. It aligns a little bit with what we do for promises in templates, where you can do promise.value. I just think this is a more simple API. So
I'm also heavily in favor of that. My number one reason is because when you see that in the debugger, you can just click, like there'll be a value getter setter that you can just click and it will show you the value.
Yes, that's another big reason.
Where if you have a getter, like how do you're gonna have like they have to like know where the internal property is.
Yep.
To be able to read it, but with just a click, they can see it in the developer tools. So that's, to me, that's like you just can't. I can't get past that.
Yeah, I agree.
My question is something we talked about a while ago. Did we talk about can observation would become can compute?
Maybe, yeah. But I mean, yes, that's what.
But it would just be this API, basically.
No, sorry. Okay, we did think about that for a bit, taking it back. But now, okay, because I think can value is a nice name here. And it's a nice plate. Like can value is really the can compute of old, but really can observation provides computed values. Can value is more of like a meta, like it's kind of like I forgot what it's called, but it's like an integrator of a whole bunch of different ways you might want to create a single observable value.
Mm-hmm.
Observations are one, reading from a key is another, just a value that you can get and set inside there is another one. Like all those currently in CanJS 4 are different individual like files. They're actually different constructor functions, which is actually really nice because can compute, if you ever looked at the old can compute code, it was like really crazy because it like tried to support all these different APIs, but then had to make them like kind of all work together with this like weird core. It was weird. So in 4.0, we started splitting them all out to do their individual way of making a single value observable, which is really nice technically. But from a user, it's nice to just be like, I just want to think about can value. Like it's nice to have that just like one thing that sticks in your head to create single observable values. That's what can value is. Now, can observation isn't really, what does that mean? An observation? Like that's not what it does. Like that's not like if you look at Ember or other frameworks, they call those things computes, computed properties, computed values. So can observation is really what supplies computed behavior. We should just rename that to can compute, I think. And then we can have can compute legacy be the old version of can compute and tell people, hey, start using can value if you want to migrate.
So wait, does can value have an equivalent of the old can compute API?
It has parallels.
So it has
the function form. Which one's the like can compute function?
So I've got another issue open for what the API should look like for replacing can compute. If we want to talk about this, I want to make sure that we talk about the like React and RVM stuff before we run out of time. But in this issue, I open up some ideas for how we can have those same can compute APIs and can value. So maybe like a method on like can value is just an object that has these methods. like a starting with for a primitive value, observe for a function, maybe also a setter, and then a resolved with that is the most complicated, but lets you do the same thing that you did in can compute with, like the get set on and off settings configuration.
So to Matthew, the point is there are parallel APIs, but it is not like a compatible API. It's not there's like a single function that has like 15 different ways of calling it. Instead, like all the different ways of calling it are like, you know.
So what's the equivalent to can compute function?
Can compute legacy.
Okay. So can value doesn't have equivalence.
Are you saying
what
like
you mean by equivalent? Like equivalent API
name and
equivalent
age
in terms of logic, huh?
Name and age, right there. Like, what's the equivalent to that?
Yeah, you'd use can compute
or can
legacy.
Okay, so there's can value doesn't have an equivalent.
It doesn't have equivalent API, but it has equivalent functionality. It just like
what's the equivalent functionality?
That's what Chase was saying.
So. Yeah, so that's what this it doesn't right now.
It doesn't.
Okay. I will. Yeah, we will build that, and this issue is proposing some APIs for that. So, like you would call just compute in a value, maybe like a starting with method. I put some ideas in here, so like or maybe a from value. So value.from value with a primitive. Talked about. Like value.returned by for the this same API. So instead of compute and you pass it a function, then maybe value.returned by and you pass it a function.
Value.compute, especially if we create can compute as well. If can observation becomes can compute, then another good option is can compute. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so that's what just compute as one of the options.
So I guess taking it a step back, Matthew, is how do you feel about the idea of instead of like a single, what Chase and I are coming to is like instead of a single mono function that like has 15 different ways that can be called, let's just make can value have like kind of more clearly labeled, named functions that would do all of the same stuff that the old can compute did. But you have to call them, value.from, value.bind, value.from value, value.compute, value resolved with, or something.
Yeah, it's totally fine to me. I guess where I'm confused is it sounds like you're saying the new can compute will be like this higher level API. This already seems pretty high level.
What do you mean? Wait, what do you mean? This can
value
is the new high level API. There's just a legacy can compute for anybody who is still using can compute and didn't want to like rewrite all their code.
Okay.
Just like we have actually in reality, CanJS does not use can compute as of CanJS 4.0.
Yeah, I know. So
all the internals have been removed from using can compute and uses the underlying observables directly now.
Okay. All right, so can value replaces can compute. I'm fine with that.
In terms of like from users' perspective.
Functionality, sure. Yeah. So I guess like from bind and is there two? The ones you've already implemented don't do everything. Like it looks to me like can value bind would be equivalent to the old can compute taking a function.
Yeah, so right now the methods are like the can value methods are bind from and to. They all take objects and key paths.
Oh, okay. Never mind. Sorry.
So yeah, so
this is where we wanted Chase wanted advice and thoughts on like how we should name these things.
Yeah, because I don't really want to like overload these same.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wrote that as an option where we could overload these same methods to have the same functionality, but I think it would be better for them to have a separate signature or a separate like method name.
Yeah, that's fine. So starting with takes an initial value. whereas from takes an object and a key path.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Yeah. Just trying to think about what all ones are missing. Guess those are the only ones.
I think these are the main, like I tried to cover the main common use cases of can compute, of like starting with an initial value, having just a like getter function, having both a getter and a setter. And then the most complicated is you need to listen to some other object to be able to update the value of like this observable.
Yeah. So with the second form, there's actually one that's only a getter. There's the only getter form of that as well.
That's what name and age is here, I think, right?
Yeah, that's what name and age is.
Yes.
So yeah,
that's overloading kind of. Should those be separate?
I think it's okay for one method to have like the getter and the setter, like an optional setter argument, because it's not.
Yeah, because also you could think about it. You could pass to from a two-way bound compute or two-way bound observable, and want to get from that a singly directional value. So you would only I would imagine that you might never do it for bind, but you would definitely do it for from and from to pass it only one argument, which is another single value observable. You know what I mean, Jason?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Where you're basically changing, like you're getting the single way binding from a different observable without having to pass a key path.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'm gonna leave this open. We're not gonna like we don't have to make a decision on this. So I'm gonna leave this issue open for now.
So this is a sidebar. Did this can-stash bindings is going to use this, I assume, right? Or have you already done that, or
no? So there's a different package that I'm making called can-bind.
That's the can-bind, yeah.
Yeah, which is going to be used by can component under the hood for like providing a view model to the like when you instantiate a component, and then can-stash bindings and can route will also use can-bind.
Oh yeah.
Cool. We have a little bit of time left. Justin, I wanted to get to the React and RVM thoughts that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I wanted to discuss it. I guess I don't have like any conclusions right now, but someone was asking about like, you know, saying that they want to know what CanJS vision is around having seen all the work that we're starting to do around React. What is CanJS vision and things like that, and how does like React and Preact and all of that? What is all of that? So yes, and they also asked like, what is is there going to be like a unified one? Yes, that is actually the plan. Like, so that's what I am thinking was voted on. I still think JSX is another kind of thing. All right, so let me take a big step back. And this is kind of my perspective on things. Our goal is to get, Patogi's larger goal is to just change how people write software and make it better, faster, easier, that kind of thing. So our open source is a big part of that. We try to make things that are going to appeal to people and then help them write better apps. CanJS for at least all of 3.0 was all about like it's this evolving, that was what was written. I still think that's very much true about our stuff. Like that's the spirit. So if we've got all these powerful observables and we've got now like cool debugging tricks and we've got, a whole bunch of like data layer that's getting ever increasing. Those things are, and I think the JSX is a great templating engine. And there's a lot of people using it. I think we can really help them. So that's why we're doing some React stuff. You know, we could end up doing Vue stuff if it was broken up a little bit more. Our goal is to just make awesome stuff and get it into the community and work with them to make their apps awesome. So when it comes to like React React View Model and PostAct, the idea is, yes, to integrate that into a single tool that Tovi is going to support. Our open source team is going to work on it, that we are going to have like a website for it. We're not sure what it's going to be called, but the idea is it's going to be our observable stack, probably our data stack, that you can use in like a React component. Try to merge those two worlds the best way that we can. So if you've been using React View Model, our goal is not, hopefully we won't break anything if you switch to whatever this new project is, because they're very similar. It's more like, what this means is that we're going to be taking it on as like a project that kind of sits alongside all of our other projects. Long term, I still think that something like the CanJSX is really where I'd like to see us go. I still think like a huge problem with React is that it does not produce custom elements.
Yeah.
And I would love to see someone solve that someday. I think that's a really important solution. And if the Tovi open source can do that, then that's great. And if like us kind of doing a little bit of React stuff and kind of CanJS, we can bring those worlds, get experience in both and bring those worlds together sometime in the future, I think that would be awesome. So those are my thoughts. Other people have things they want to share.
I was mostly nodding in agreement. I think kind of mentioned this earlier in talking about the survey results, but I think we can make a real difference in the rest of CanJS's adoption by making our like observable and data layer stuff work well in React. So PostAct or whatever it's going to be called is a good bridge to that.
Yeah, I mean, CanJS's computed system is like, it's got to be legitimately. It probably has got to be by far the best, like, because, you know, if you will talk about its reactive system, which is CanJS's kind of computed system, and, you know, Ember has one-ish, I think. It doesn't, I don't think they've still ever made it so it can like infer dependencies the way that ours can. Like, it's really nice to have that work. And if we can bring that tech to other people and it makes the rest of CanJS better, then, you know, there's only one well, eventually, hopefully called Can Compute, called Can Observation right now, and Observation Recorder. And we've got really good proxy observables that we built. That's cool tech, and those things can add a lot to any framework, I think. Maybe Vue should just pick up ours up, basically build the same thing.
Any other thoughts? Yeah, long pause. Matthew or Sheriff?
I don't know how. I guess the question is, what is the vision for why we do this? I mean, number one, people have asked for it. We have dabbled into React already with React View Model. I feel like this is kind of the same way we do with a lot of our stuff. Is, you know, we're talking about can value and stuff. Is like we solve one problem, and then we figure out there's lots of like little, like, kind of break it apart. And that's one of the things that's really cool about like can value and stuff like that. And this is like, what is it called? PostAct is already using, like, we've already built can observe. This is like a very thin layer on top of that, it sounds like. So I don't know. I think it will inform us and be able to continue to do this process, you know, kind of continue to refine all of our stuff.
So, I mean, I guess the final thing is like, you know, we're still, for the foreseeable future, like component and stash are still going to exist. We're still doing work on them. You know, I don't see those as mutually exclusive. I mean, in some ways, what I would really love is that, and I think maybe it's possible, is that like CanJS is really the data layer stuff, that especially with like can connect and can query logic and stuff like that. That is something that, you know, it is inherently stateful. And we can have really good tools around that. And I think it would be fine if like the rest of the world has their view layer. Fine, whatever, go for it, right? Everybody's got their own different way of wanting to like write HTML given some data. There's thousands of different ways of doing it. Fine. But how to do state mechanics and how to do data connections are a huge part. And in some ways, actually the much more important part, because you could just swap in any template. So to focus on those things, that would be ideal. I would love it if like, you know, we just made tools that work with every view layer, right? Like what's that HTML? What, like they do it with web reflection or whatever his template engine. You know, you just pass a template tag and it uses that to parse it, and then you can like kind of mount it. I forgot what that's called.
Yeah.
Just make it. You can use an observable with that and a compute. Just that whole thing is automatically wrapped in a compute, and there you go. You literally take cam define map and camobserve and compute and just like here's all of that. It's there.
Yeah, they're talking about having binding inside of template tags. I mean, you could use it for that as well.
What do you mean binding inside of template tags?
You know, the template element.
Yeah.
There's some work on having like mustache stuff
For that?
Yeah. But it's going to be very bare bones, I believe, at first. So,
was that the WebKit team's proposal, or?
Yeah, I think they're part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, to bind to anything, CanJS can bind to anything.
I think there's a chance also to make a higher level architecture with CanJS, with the data, because CanJS has, for me, it has the best routing system that exists in JavaScript community now, because it makes the application state independent from the routing system. I didn't see any framework does this. Only CanJS does this. So I think we should also find a way how to sell how to make a high level architecture, and how to compose all the small components, and find a way to compose the whole application system, and how the observables objects can communicate with each other. I have friends that struggles with Redux, and every time they ask me how you did this with CanJS. So I answered, just drop it and use can React, and you have observables, and you are fine. So I don't have ideas how we can do this right now, but I think we should keep this in mind. So
I think that I mean, in some ways, I think introducing ourselves, like in terms of like our observable stack to other communities, will help like broaden the interest and the use of the observable stack, which allows us then to focus on other things. So I think making CanJS's observable stack really awesome, I think, is really important. Like making the new can observe great to use, have really nice decorators to do mix-ins, validation, all of those like special behaviors. Because define map is all right, but you can't use it like as a class, and it's not projecting the same, and you know, it's got some pitfalls because it's not a proxy.
I love you too, Daddy. I love you
Yeah.
too, Daddy.
Thank you.
I love you too.
Thank you. Love you. Do you want to come up here real quick? Okay. Anyways, so yeah, I think we need to focus on our observable system.
Mm-hmm. Hey.
You being shy? Yeah. Okay. You want to say hi? No. Okay. She's being shy. So yeah, I think opening ourselves up to other frameworks is a really good idea.
Mm.
I mean, maybe that's a proposal. Is just like find 15 other templates besides React and just kind of make like a post-act kind of thing for them. Whatever that, I can't remember that other template engine. There's a few of them. We could just be like, oh, here's a little observable layer for it that plugs in, and then just get attention towards those pieces of technology that way.
Okay.
Cool. We're at about time. Thanks for everyone who's watching on YouTube. Thanks for watching. You guys have anything before we go? Nope. All right. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another stream. Talk to you guys then.
See ya.
Bye.
Thanks, Jason.